Coming to you from the Palatius Bottom Line Studios here in Lexington, Kentucky, it's the Bottom Line Lexington podcast. Very little going on here locally today on Tuesday, April 26th. There was something at UK called the Catspy Awards last night. In other words, it sounds like a big joke to me. I'm not even going to acknowledge it because it just sounds like pomp and circumstance, sound and fury signifying nothing as usual, just something to get their names in the paper. We have a lot of rules on the bottom line, and one of them is we don't talk about women's basketball. And even now that women's basketball at UK has lost a coach, they lost another player yesterday. I think they're down to like 7 players or something like that, and another coach left. Who knows what's going on over there? But women's basketball is, along with every other sport in college, other than football and men's basketball, it's irrelevant. It doesn't make money. On average, women's basketball loses $14 million a year. Sorry, they're not relevant. I don't care what you say. By the way, you see any boosters for women's college basketball? You sure do see it for Alabama football. You sure do see it for Kentucky men's basketball. I don't see many women's college basketball boosters around the country, much less here in Lexington at UK. Another rule: if you can't bet on the next game, I'm not going to talk about it. I can't bet on any women's college basketball games in the regular season, and it's tough to find lines even in the Final Four. I would never bet on a women's college basketball game. That's why I don't talk about it, because it's irrelevant, it doesn't move the meter, and let's just be honest, people don't want to hear about it. Bottom line on women's basketball in Kentucky, you've got a coach, Matthew Mitchell, who seemingly would rather sing songs with his rock band than make it to the Final Four. I guarantee you ask him in his heart of hearts, would he rather have a #1 hit on the Billboard chart or make a women's Final Four with UK? I guarantee you he'd say a #1 hit on the charts. That's where we are. I don't know anything about women's basketball. I don't claim to know it. I just know it's irrelevant. By the way, do you remember back in March, somehow Kentucky got to play potentially their first 4 games of the NCAA tournament at home? How did they pull that off? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the NCAA says, wow, look at this Kentucky men's team. Look at how crazy these fans are. Look how much money they bring in. If they could ever get the women's program to do that, we'd make even more money. So let's just give them more games at home, so maybe potentially one day they can make it to the Final Four and we'd make even more money. So they got to play at Rupp Arena this year, and they lost. And by the way, did you see the crowd at Rupp Arena the next round after UK lost? There wasn't 500 people at that place, and that's for a regional final women's basketball. They'll probably tell you there were a few thousand. I flipped channels that day. It was Easter Sunday. I was watching television. There was not 1,000 people at that game. I guarantee it. And most of those were people from the band and people who were associated with the schools who were playing. When's the last time you honestly sat down and watched a women's basketball game on TV? Exactly. And nobody watches the WNBA either. Why do you think they're hemorrhaging money just like women's college basketball is? When do you see women's college basketball on television? When they contractually have to show it, or when literally nothing else is going on. Women's college basketball. I can't bet on it, and nobody watches it. So I ain't talking about it. That's the bottom line. One of my favorite sites to check out every once in a while is something called SpotRack, SPOTRAC.com. And what this site deals with almost exclusively is player salaries in professional sports here in America. And they put together their most valuable players from this past NBA season, depending on what they produce on the court and their salaries that they're paid. The #1 player, Anthony Davis. He is the most valuable player in the NBA for what he produces on the court compared to what he makes in salary. Other players who made this list, CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard from Portland. Of course, Steph Curry made it. Andre Drummond, Pau Gasol, Hassan Whiteside. But to see Portland have 2 of the top 8 guys on this list, you got to think, wow, that's a team you'd like to invest in the future. But Anthony Davis, still the most valuable player in the NBA because he's still on his rookie contract and still putting up huge numbers, even though he had an off year this year. Not much else to speak of locally other than maybe Bob Knight going back to Indiana. All hail the general himself, Robert Montgomery Knight. Why is he going back to Indiana? Oh, it's not to talk to the basketball team. It's not to talk to Indiana University. It's to campaign for Donald Trump. So those of you Democrats out there, yet another reason to hate Bobby Knight. This guy's a terrible guy. If you're Trump, why would you want him campaigning for you? I guess because it's a name. But if I'm coming to Kentucky, if I'm Donald Trump, I don't want Joe B. Hall campaigning for me. I don't want Eddie Sutton campaigning for me. Heck, I don't want Rick Pitino campaigning for me. Trump must be desperate to get that Indiana primary. But all hail Bobby Knight on his way back to the Hoosier State. Only good things can happen now. National news, looks like North Carolina basketball and football is going to get off the hook for these academic penalties, these academic fraud they've had for the last, say 20 years now. They came out yesterday with a new list of allegations and what they're going with. Originally, they said they had been doing it since 2002, but then they changed it to 2005. Just happenstancely, North Carolina won the national championship in 2005. What a coincidence. The NCAA will never take away a national basketball championship. You ever notice that the NCAA never takes away a national championship? They'll take away a Final Four. They'll vacate a Final Four, no problem. But they never admit that their national champion has done something wrong. Do you think the Fab Five at Michigan would have got busted twice if they had won one of those national championship games? Which they should have won the one in 93 against North Carolina. No, of course not. They'll get UMass when Calipari was there. They'll get Memphis when Calipari was there. They won't get Kentucky in 2012 when Calipari was there, no matter what comes out later down the line. And I'm sure there'll be some kind of allegations that they were eventually. So all this admitted academic fraud at North Carolina, who's going to pay the price? Here's a theme. Women's basketball. Why? Because they don't make money. The quote-unquote Olympic sports, which is basically everything other than football and men's basketball, all the Olympic sports, they're going to be the ones that suffer. But ironically, the only two sports that weren't mentioned, football, men's basketball. Wonder why that is. Oh, that's why. They're the only programs that make money for North Carolina, or basically any other school. So they are untouchable. Remember when Rashard McCants came out a few years ago and claimed all this stuff was going on? And then Roy Williams came out and cried on national television saying it was wrong and he was rebuffed and he had all these players backing him up. Unbelievable. They get nothing for this? If you're Syracuse, if you're Louisville and you've sat out the tournament because of you're trying to self-impose your own probation on yourself before the NCAA does, you've got to feel like a complete moron right now. What Syracuse did was not even a tenth of what North Carolina did. They had a tutor help Fab Mello. That's what Syracuse did. And they sat out a tournament, and Boeheim sat out a few games this season. That's it. That's all they did. North Carolina's had academic fraud for 20 years. What are they getting? They're not getting anything for their big-time programs. What do they get? Football and basketball get nothing. It's the other people who have to pay. If this happens at North Carolina and Duke, you get away with it. Some of the other blue bloods, maybe the people who really bring in the big bucks. Anybody who knows me knows I am not a homer. But if this happens at Kentucky, or if this happens at Louisville, they get the death penalty. They're SMU circa 1987. Bottom line, it's all about who you are in life. It's about being in high school all over again. When I was in high school, I pulled a little prank, and people were threatening me with jail. People were threatening me with detention. People were threatening me, and people hated me forever for that. 3 months later, another kid does the exact same prank. But they just pat him on the back and say, oh, it's okay. That was kind of funny. That was kind of cool. Why did I get punished and this kid didn't get anything, and he did it after me? He got the idea from me. Why does that happen? Because I had a smart mouth, and I knew what I could get away with, and I knew what I couldn't get away with, and this kid never said a word to anybody. It's all about who you are in life. And North Carolina and Duke can get away with things that pretty much anyone else in the nation cannot get away with. And that's the bottom line. Reds last night lose 5-3 to the Mets. The game was tied 3-3 going to the bottom of the seventh. And of course, as always, the Reds bullpen blows it. This time, the culprit, J.C. Ramirez. Who's J.C. Ramirez? Yet another bullpen arm that nobody knows and nobody will ever hear of again after this season because he won't be on the Reds. If their bullpen was so great, why wasn't J.J. Hoover in? Why wasn't Ohlendorf in? Yeah, they don't trust anybody in that bullpen anymore, and I don't blame them. The Reds' best starter, Raisel Iglesias, was going up against Noah Syndergaard, the Mets' best starter last night. That's what happens. You get into your bullpen, you've got to try to win that game. That's your best starting pitcher if you're the Reds. This bullpen is in big trouble, though. Cincinnati Reds starting pitchers are averaging less than 5 innings per start. That's the fewest in all of Major League Baseball. Want some more bad news? The Reds pitchers have allowed 37 home runs this year, the most in Major League Baseball. They've also allowed 92 walks this year, the most in Major League Baseball. Tough to win games when your pitching allows so much and your starting pitching doesn't last very long at all. Any good news for the Reds last night? Billy Hamilton got a hit. He's now up to 167. Now, how did he get that hit? A bunt single. Why doesn't he bunt more? It's like Willie Mays Hayes in Major League 2. He tries to start hitting home runs. If he would just hit the ball on the ground, Lou Brown would just say, anytime you hit the ball in the air, you owe me 20 push-ups. And then Willie Mays Hayes says, how am I supposed to swing when I can't lift my arms? That's the way Billy Hamilton should be doing it. Bunt, pound the ball on the ground, and run like the wind. 2 steals last night. He's only got 4 for the season, but it's tough to steal first base last time I checked. 167 average, 255 on base percentage. You can't have that, whether you're a leadoff hitter or a number 9 hitter. Tonight, the Reds at the Mets again. Brandon Finnegan, 3.74 ERA versus big fat Bartolo Colon, 2.89 ERA. Mets are about a minus 165, minus 170 out in the desert, depending on where you shop. Brandon Finnegan, 23 years old. Bartolo Colon, 42 years old. 19-year age difference and 19 years of getting fat for Bartolo Colon. That's the advantage of tonight's game. By the way, here's a stat for big fat Bartolo Colon. He wins tonight. He passes Pedro Martinez in all-time wins. Yet further proof that the win is not a valid statistic in Major League Baseball. Pedro Martinez, one of the greatest pitchers ever. Bartolo Colon, simply fat. Tough to bet on the Reds tonight. Brandon Phillips out. Jay Bruce out. There's no value in taking the Reds tonight. You don't know what they're going to give you offensively. Although Finnegan has pitched well, especially on the road this year, this is not a game I would touch because I'm getting no value with the Reds, and I'm not laying minus 170 on anybody. Football, Tom Brady's 4-game suspension back on. It's amazing how the Patriots restructured Brady's contract to give him the minimum salary possible for those first 4 games this season. They knew this was coming. What does this mean? It means the same thing it did last year at this time. Jimmy Garoppolo, come on down. If you're a fantasy football player, I think you still draft Tom Brady where you would, because first of all, you shouldn't be drafting quarterbacks early anyway. And once we come back from this 4-game suspension, Tom Brady will be in 2007 Spygate mode, where he just wants to piss everybody off and dominate the league. Sam Bradford of the Eagles, we don't know how long we can say that, wants to be traded. He says he doesn't see himself as a stopgap quarterback. I see him more as a bottleneck quarterback to me. That's just my opinion. Spotrac.com, our favorite site we mentioned earlier, says that Bradford has made $78 million in 6 years in the NFL. So I went on ProFootballReference.com and I got a few stats for Mr. Bradford. Of those $78 million over his 6 years, that's $1.24 million a start. That's $3.12 million per win that he has quarterbacked, and $1 million a touchdown. 6 years, $78 million, 78 touchdowns. As a comparison, Peyton Manning had 274 starts in the league and 539 touchdowns, which means Peyton Manning would have to start 265 more games and not throw a touchdown to keep the same pace that Sam Bradford has given you throughout his career in his first 6 years. And Sam Bradford is upset that the Eagles are going to go out and draft a quarterback to replace him? Wow, that's flawed logic. Bradford's highest quarterback rating, 52. Never been in the top 20, and now he's demanding a trade. What happened to last week when the Eagles pulled off this trade? He was pissed off. He's going to fight. Now he wants out. Bottom line on Sam Bradford, he's injury prone, he's played on lousy teams, and he was traded last year for Nick Foles. Nick Foles was a later round draft pick. Sam Bradford is a former number 1 overall draft pick. And ask any Eagles fan, they hate Sam Bradford. If I'm a GM, I would never have Sam Bradford on my team, regardless of my quarterback situation. Even if I'm Denver and have nobody. How would you like to be Denver and trade for Sam Bradford? Now you've got the same situation the Eagles had last year with Mark Sanchez and Bradford. Just go ahead and mail in the season now. Other baseball last night, Detroit Tigers. Tyler Collins, a center fielder for the Tigers, flipped off the fans when he lost a fly ball in the lights last night. Tyler Collins. If you're Barry Bonds and a jerk already, you can get away with stuff like this. But you're Tyler Collins. 3 years, 88 games, 252 at-bats, 5 home runs, 250 average. Dude, you don't have the cachet to be flipping people off. But apparently the fans of Detroit are just upset in general. Everybody in my age group remembers the 1984 Tigers and how dominant they were. And they started the season 35-5. One of the greatest seasons in the history of Major League Baseball. After that, they went 26 years and made the playoffs 2 times. But from 2011 to 2014, they had one of the top 5 payrolls in baseball, and they made the playoffs all 4 years. Then coming into last year, they still got a high payroll. What happened? They tanked, and the fans turned on them quickly, as they're apt to do in Detroit a lot of times. And this year, they've started out slowly again. People want Brad Ausmus fired, and at any chance, these Detroit fans, who are used to teams like the Detroit Lions, will turn on you in a heartbeat. Now, if Miguel Cabrera had done that, maybe he gets off a little lighter. But when you're Tyler Collins, know who you are. Be self-aware. Know what you can get away with and know what you can't get away with. Was it fair to the fans to boo him for what he did? Probably not. But life's about expectations. I talk about this all the time. In the 2000s, I was living in Atlanta, and all you heard about was Georgia football. They had Matt Stafford coming back at quarterback. They had Noshawn Marito coming back at running back. And they had A.J. Green coming back at receiver. All 3 of those guys wound up being first-round picks. Stafford was a number 1 overall pick. A.J. Green wound up going 4th in his draft. Noshawn Marito was a first-round pick. This team's going to be a national champion, right? They were ranked number 1 preseason, obviously, but they went 9-3. So what did Georgia fans do? Fire the athletic director, fire the coach, and let's force our quarterback, the number 1 overall pick, let's force him to turn pro so we can get somebody else in here who can actually win football games. Whereas here in Kentucky that year, nobody expected anything from Kentucky. They went 6-6 and made the Music City Bowl. They probably had a parade downtown for them. So you got a 9-3 team that everybody hates, and a 6-6 team everybody loves. Expectations. NBA last night, Blazers over Clippers. That series tied at 2, but the biggest news, obviously, Chris Paul injured, out for the rest of the playoffs. Clippers are done. They are absolutely done. I think the Blazers go in and win this series now. The Clippers can't even win this series, and the Clippers will advance to play the Warriors. This is the best thing that ever happened to the Warriors. Now, with Steph Curry out, they get to play the Blazers potentially next round, and even if they do play the Clippers have no chance of beating them without Chris Paul. That was great news for the Warriors last night when Chris Paul goes down. But our friends in the desert, the odds makers in Las Vegas, have now made the Spurs the favorite to win the NBA title, and I can't say I disagree with them. Mark Cuban last night before the Mavericks game with the Thunder comes out and says Russell Westbrook is an all-star, but not a superstar. Whether that's true or not, if you're Mark Cuban, you do not give a hothead like Russell Westbrook the incentive to go out and kick your butt. And guess what? That's what he did last night. Cuban's been around long enough. He knows not to give players or other teams bulletin board material that they could use against him to make them a little bit more fired up to beat him. But apparently he doesn't learn. Westbrook was first team All-NBA this year, and he was better than his teammate Kevin Durant. And then last night, he goes out and gets 36, 12, and 9, almost getting yet another triple-double against Cuban's Mavericks. Yeah, great move, Cuban. But who am I to say? Cuban doesn't care if he wins or loses for the most part. He's still got plenty of money to laugh at me. For our Mac Daddy Stogie pick tonight, we're going to go back to Major League Baseball. Chicago White Sox, 14-6, versus the Toronto Blue Jays, 10-11. Oh, that's an easy call, right? White Sox are a small favorite over Toronto. On the mound for the White Sox, Chris Sale, 1.80 ERA, against R.A. Dickey, the knuckleballer, 6.10 ERA. Well, this is an easy call, right? White Sox have every advantage. Wrong again! Give me R.A. Dickey, that fluttering knuckleball, and the Toronto Blue Jays as an underdog at home against that tough lefty Chris Sale and the surging 14-6 Chicago White Sox tonight. The Toronto Blue Jays, your Mac Daddy Stogie lock of the night, and make sure you're smoking that cigar before the ninth inning. And that's it for today's edition of the Bottom Line Lexington podcast. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at BottomLineLex. Look for us on Facebook. Go to our website, bottomlinelexington.com, and make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and as always, may the winners be yours.